Good morning, freeze dryers. Welcome back to the Live Life Simple Kitchen. The price of meat has just gone astronomical lately, and as far as I'm concerned, it's like money in the bank having freeze-dried meat now. So today we're gonna do some freeze-dried pork chops. We're gonna infuse these with some apple and some rosemary and make them super delicious. We're gonna do all of that coming up. So for today's pork chops, we're going to use the sous vide to cook them. We're going to infuse them with all kinds of flavor using the Avid Armor vacuum chamber sealer. If you don't have those, you can cook these however you want. A crock pot will work just as well. But we're going to show you all of the tips and tricks for meat and rehydrating them and getting them to taste that you want when it's all said and done. So we're going to get started with just preparing the meat. We're going to do that by trimming off all of the extra fat off of these pork chops. A couple of very important things when you are buying meat or getting the meat ready for the freeze dryer. These pork chops are cut very, very thin. And to me, that's very important because I think it helps a lot with rehydration. Really, that's just a good rule in general with freeze drying. You can see how thinly cut these are. If you have thicker pork chops, I would recommend cutting them this way, almost filleting them so they are this thin. You're gonna wanna take any additional extra fat off of them, and any remaining fat that's on here most likely will get rendered off when you cook these. You can grill these as well. I've tried all different kinds of preparing meats and even doing raw meats and then trying to rehydrate them, and I think cooked meats do the best. Slow cooked meats usually rehydrate the best. They maintain their texture and their tenderness the best. But for pork chops, for me, it's just too easy to dry them out if you do them any other way than a sous vide or a slow cooker. So for most people, meat is a very important part of their diet, but I see a lot of people making a lot of boo-boos when they prepare meat, and I think in order to get meat to store long term, you really have to make this as lean as possible and thin as possible, and also make sure that you're removing any bones that are in the meat. So pork chops often have a bone in the pork chop. Make sure you take all of that meat from the bone. The next thing I'm going to do is take some fresh rosemary, and we're going to infuse this meat with rosemary and a little bit of broth. I'm going to use vegetable broth, but you can use pork broth, chicken broth, beef broth, whatever you really wanted to. I'm going to lay these pork chops on top of the rosemary, and then we're just gonna cover it with some broth. We're gonna throw it in the vacuum sealer on the marinade function, and that's gonna open up all the pores of this meat. And before I do that, I'm gonna put a little bit of garlic on here as well. And then all this liquid and everything that we're gonna add to this is gonna go into our bag for our sous vide. So it's just gonna cook in all this. So whatever doesn't get infused in this right now will eventually be cooked in that as well, and really just add a ton of flavor. I'm also just gonna add just a splash of apple juice on here. This is real apple juice. There's no sugar added. There's no other things added. It's 100% juice. And we're just gonna cover this up so everything is fully submerged. We're gonna hit the marinate function. That's gonna run for 100 seconds, and what this does is really opens up the pores of the meat and allows all of that flavor to go right into the meat. And now we're gonna put this into a sous vide bag. All of that good stuff. You want to make sure that it is all the way submerged. All of that meat is under liquid. If you're not all the way under, just add a little bit of extra water or broth, and then we're going to seal this up as well. Then we're going to go into a pan or your sous vide container. Clip it to the side. I'm going to fill this with water until it reaches about the middle of the minimum and maximum on the sous vide. So you can start the sous vide either with the app, or you can do it manually on the sous vide. I'm gonna do 140 for 45 minutes to an hour. And the great thing about a sous vide is you really cannot overcook something because it just maintains that same temperature throughout the whole cooking process. So once it gets to that temperature, it's just circulating that temperature of water around. So it's just cooking in its own juices. Very similar to a slow cooker, but the sous vide is, in my opinion, up a notch from that. One other thing that you can throw into that mix is some sliced apples if you want to infuse even more of that apple flavor in there. I actually plan on rehydrating with apple juice. Pork chops are done, and these should be a perfect 140 degrees. You can look in there and it looks pretty delicious. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna open this up. We're gonna put these onto a freeze dryer tray that's parchment lined. And then I'm gonna take the juice that is in here and we're gonna reuse it and try and freeze dry it and see if we can just use that to rehydrate these pork chops. So these smell absolutely amazing. I'm not gonna drain them or anything. I'm just gonna put them right onto here. And then I'm gonna pour the rest of this liquid into some silicone molds. You could also use dividers as well, but these are gonna make just a little ice cube. So I'm gonna pop a lid on this. We're gonna put them in the deep freeze, and then I'll see you tomorrow at the freeze dryer. Okay, our pork chops and our pork chop sauce should be nice and frozen now. Now we have some frozen pork chops, pre-cooked, and then we have some ice cubes that we should be able to freeze dry and use those to rehydrate as well if we want to. And if you're doing liquids like these broth cubes, I would recommend pre-freezing them for at least 24 hours. And mainly just really anything that you're pre-freezing, try and do 24 hours. Sometimes if your freezer is not super duper cold, it does take 24 hours for everything to get fully frozen, especially if it's a thicker thing like these cubes. So this recipe, along with over 250 other recipes, can be found on freezedryingcookbook.com. We update that site weekly and add multiple recipes every single week to it. If you don't want to do the membership, you can do a hard copy version. This can be found on Amazon. We'll put a link for that down in the description. Please take a minute to subscribe to Live Life Simple if you have not already. We do primarily freeze drying on this channel. A few other things every once in a while. While you're there, click the bell to get notifications. That'll send you a notification every time a new video comes out. That's Sundays at 8 a.m. If you like the content we're providing, let us know, give us a thumbs up. If you're a new freeze dryer or you have questions about freeze drying, check out our Facebook group or our MeWe group. It's Retired at 40's freeze drying group. We can answer all kinds of questions. You can use this, the search magnifying glass on the site and search all kinds of old threads, topics, etc. And if you're thinking about pulling the trigger on a freeze dryer, please consider using our affiliate link. We will put a link for that down in the description. That helps this YouTube channel. It helps us bring out new content to you, helps us maintain the Facebook and the MeWe groups and our social media outlets. It also helps us do giveaways in those groups. That allows us to develop products that will streamline your whole processing of freeze-dried food, from Mylar bags, oxygen absorbers, lids for the trays, all the dividers for the trays, pre-cut parchment, tray stackers, silicone mats, and also our new and improved food funnel. We have a large size funnel that will reduce your spillage, and we also have a stand that goes with it now too that's fully adjustable. It'll fit in a mason jar either size. All of those products can be found at freezedryingsupplies.com. We're a USA company, we're a small business. We develop and make the products in the United States, and that is possible from freeze dryers like yourself, so thank you for that. And our apple pork chops look like they're about done, so let's go take a look. All right, our pork chops took 33 hours and 14 minutes. It looks like we got a little bubbling coming off of the marinade, but the pork chops, really interesting looking. They definitely got quite a bit smaller, but I'm gonna bag these up and we will go back to the freeze drying kitchen and try and rehydrate these. All right, so these pork chops are pretty interesting. It's pretty amazing that you can put a pork chop in a container like this and just rehydrate it whenever you want. These are already injected with quite a bit of flavor, but there's a couple different ways that you can do this at home if you don't have everything that I have, if you don't have a vacuum chamber sealer, if you don't save the juice as well like we did today. I'm gonna take these cubes of all of the juice that we injected into the pork first, and then I'm gonna separate the pork chops out by themselves as well. And these are pretty baby little pork chops. These will definitely work on bigger ones. This is just what the store happened to have today. Here's our powder. And the powder I'm gonna mix with some water. Stir that up. That'll turn just back into exactly how it was before we freeze dried it. I'm gonna cover the pork chops with this, along with a little bit of 100% juice, apple juice, so we can get our apple injected pork chops. And then I'm gonna put a splash of this apple juice in here with it. Mix that all together. I'm gonna throw our juice in the microwave just for a couple minutes to get this warm. That could also be boiled or heated a different way. You could sous vide it again if you really wanted to. Apple always goes really well with pork. It's very complementary to pork. And as far as the cubed juice, I think that would be really cool to throw into a Mylar bag with the pork, and then you can separately heat it up and rehydrate it together when you're ready. And I'm not sure if I can capture it on camera, but you can see little sparkly crystals on here. That would be the sugars from the apple juice when we originally injected this. I think that if you do apple juice on the front end before freeze drying, you need to make sure that you keep that to a very minimal level because sugar is not always a freeze dryer's friend. If it's a small amount and it's mixed with other things, it can be totally fine, but I think that if we would have injected, just straight apple juice into them or something, I think we probably would have had some problems. Now our juice is warm. I'm gonna add it to here, and we're gonna throw it into the vacuum chamber sealer. If you don't have a vacuum chamber sealer, you can also just cover this and let it sit. Meat does typically take a little bit longer than just your regular everyday type of foods. Depending on what the meat is, these little pork chops should do fine. They should actually be really quick. But if we throw it in the vacuum chamber sealer, I have a feeling it'll just be done right as soon as the marinade function is done. So we're gonna do that right now. Pork chops in. We're gonna go to the marinate function. That's already steaming up. I know it kind of does that every time. It's really hard to capture what happens in there. There's a lot of bubbling action, but it looks like it's kind of spilling over as well. I'm gonna have a mess to clean up. We're gonna pull these out. These should be ready to eat. So now these are nice and tender. And if you threw these on the grill for just a finish, or maybe threw them on a pan or a skillet, just to get them a little crisp on the outside, I think they would benefit quite a bit from that. And that's done best if you add a little fat back in, so whether that's oil or a ghee, some butter, just a quick cook on each side. You're kind of just searing. In sous vide, they call this a reverse sear. And really just 30 seconds to a minute on each side will do it. But now we have super tender, freeze-dried pork chops that melt in your mouth. And these are full of apple and garlic flavor, which is really, really good. You could inject them with all kinds of different stuff that would go with pork. I hope you guys enjoyed the video today. Hopefully you were able to pull a couple of good nuggets of information away from this video, even if you're not going to do it exactly like I am. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. Catch you next week.